I used to think therapy was like taking your car to a good mechanic. You describe the noise, surrender the keys, and, after a while, the rattle that made you clench the wheel goes away. That's the version of help I wanted when Mara and I first sat on the couch in Dr. Aaron Pike's office on Capitol Hill in Seattle. It was winter, the kind that makes everything smell like wet pine and coffee, and our fights were starting to repeat like a song we couldn't get out of our heads. Not dramatic fights. Not plate throwing. Just the slow, grinding kind where you both become stenographers, keeping receipts no judge will ever read. I'm a product manager at a mid-stage startup, which means I live in documents and roadmaps and arguing kindly until consensus appears. Mara is an ICU nurse. She has a talent for staying calm while other people bleed. I fell for her in a grocery store line because she made a toddler laugh by making a Kiwi talk. We moved in together in the kind of old building that still writes its name on the glass door in gold script. We had a ritual of Sunday pho and a wall calendar where we penciled in hikes we rarely took. Then fall came with 12-hour shifts for her, late-stage investor meetings for me, and one day we realized we were only talking about groceries, bills, and whose turn it was to wipe down the shower tiles. "Let's try couples therapy," she said after a fight about the dishwasher that wasn't about the dishwasher. "Before we become people who tell stories about each other instead of each other." I googled couples therapist Seattle attachment EFT because the internet had taught me enough to be dangerous. Dr. Pike's site looked like every therapist's site, soothing stock photos, a Poseidon blue logo, a paragraph about creating a safe container for growth. He had credentials, LMFT, 15 years in practice, adjunct at Seattle U. His reviews were short and fervent. "He saved us," one said. "He hears the woman," said another, which should have made me smile, and did, a little, because Mara deserved that, and maybe I did too. The office smelled like bergamot and something woodsy. The couch wasn't a trick couch you didn't sink. A wall of books, half psychology, half novels that announced he reads people and pages. He wore the uniform black jeans, soft shirt, leather boots. You can both walk and listen in. He greeted us by first names and offered tea with the ease of a barista who likes his regulars. When he sat, he angled his chair toward Mara and me equally. That mattered to me. The last therapist we tried for 2 sessions had stared at Mara when I spoke like I was Google Translate. He started with the usual intake questions, but asked them like he cared about the answers. How do fights start? How do they end? What's the story you each tell about why you're here? I said. We've lost the generosity that took edge off the small stuff. Mara said, I don't feel chosen. And I looked at her, surprised, a little wounded, because choosing her was the only thing I felt I'd done right in months. Tell me a recent scene, he said. Small, not catastrophic. I described a Thursday night where I'd stayed late and texted her at 6003. I'd be home by 8, but my last meeting slid into another, and by the time I left the office, the bus I'd take had turned into rain. I walked in at 8055 to a cold pan of baked ziti and a girlfriend already in bed, straight-backed with a book, the bedside lamp doing that cruel hotel truth thing to her face. She didn't yell. She said, "You manage your calendar like it's the only person you love." I tried to make a joke and failed. The night folded. Mara told it differently. He apologized, she said, and then acted like the apology reset me to 0, like a button. Do you feel controlled? Dr. Pike asked Mara, voice perfectly neutral. Not controlled, she said. Unconsidered. He nodded and turned to me. What happens in you when you hear that word? I go to the spreadsheet, I said, half joking, half confession. I start wanting to show my hours, the crisis at work, the number of times I made it home before 8. I want to be graded on average, not incident. So you present data to love, he said, so gently I didn't flinch. He gave us homework that first week that sounded less like homework and more like relief. 5-minute check-ins that weren't logistics, a rule about not using always or never, 20-second hugs that feel dumb until your body remembers it has a job. He asked permission to email us a handout about pursuer-distancer dynamics, and we said yes, and he smiled like the yes mattered as much as the reading. We left holding hands. On Broadway, the rain had taken a break, and a busker was playing a cello under a street lamp, the bow shedding frayed hair like it had done its time. Mara tucked her gloved hand under my elbow. "He gets it," she said. "He gets me." I said I thought so too, and meant it. The second session, he remembered our cat's name without checking notes. He asked Mara about a code blue that had left her quiet for 2 days. He asked me about a product demo where a VP had said interesting in the kind of voice that means, "I'd like you to become a different species." He watched us banter and tilt, and he kept both of us in the room when one of us wanted to disappear behind a clever sentence. If I'm honest, I noticed the first off note in that second session, but I gave it an alibi. It was a look. Nothing big, nothing smarmy. He gave Mara when she told a story about a patient's family accusing her of not caring because she wouldn't promise the impossible. It was admiration, which isn't wrong, which felt fine in the room, which felt not fine later, in my kitchen, when I saw the memory of it in the way Mara was suddenly texting at midnight with someone who made her feel seen. By the 5th session, the couch had a groove shaped like us. Dr. Pike had started using "we" in a way that made me uneasy and then guilty for being uneasy. "We want to help Mara feel chosen," he'd say. "We want to notice when data is a shield." He gave us words for the places we got stuck. "Protest," he called it when Mara raised her voice in a plea not to be abandoned by my calendar. "Pursuit." He called it when I walked her through the logic of my choices, like logic had ever won anybody's body back into the room. He had rules about contact. "Use the portal," he said. "If you need to reschedule, text me, but content belongs in the office." He looked at Mara when he said it. She nodded, like a student who has finally found a class she cares about. We were better for a minute. The 5-minute check-ins turned into 15 sometimes. The ziti came out of the oven hot. We kissed in the doorway like high schoolers with curfews. Then life did what it does, the hospital wrote. Mara a schedule that looked like a dare. My company pushed a release that ate 3 weekends, and therapy became less a fix and more a routine, like flossing. We went. We said the things. We tried. We were in treatment, which makes you feel like you're already cured. The text tone changed in late March. Not ours, Mara's. She started smiling at her phone in a way that said the person on the other end wasn't selling her a car. It wasn't constant. It was little jolts of delight that didn't belong to me. I told myself it was a friend from work, that guy who always brought in sourdough, the group chat with the nurse friends who kept each other alive. Then one night, half asleep, I heard the soft ping of a text that used a custom tone. Not the default, a sound I didn't recognize. I said, "Who's that?" Not accusing, just curious. She said, "Marnie, too fast," and set the phone face down. At therapy the next day, Mara said she wanted to do a few individual sessions. "There are things I should know how to say out loud before I say them in here," she said. Dr. Pike nodded and said it was common, that he does. Split treatment, judiciously if it helps the couple, that anything directly relevant would be brought back to the room with consent. He looked at me. "You okay with that?" I said yes, because the right answer is yes. Because privacy isn't betrayal, because if she needed a room without me, I should be proud to let her have it. Still, the word judicious stuck to the roof of my mouth. She booked 2 solos the next week. I didn't ask how they went. She told me anyway, in the oblique way you do when a thing is precious and you'll break it if you hold it wrong. "He thinks I minimize," she said. "He thinks I use jokes to keep things nice." I said, "He may be right," and she smiled like a sister, not a girlfriend. The next week, a small administrative thing happened that my brain didn't let go of. Our insurance only partly covered couples therapy with Pike's licensure. We paid the rest out of pocket. Before, we had been paying at the end of each session with a card I keep for grown-up stuff. Now, we had two separate charges in the portal. One for our joint session, one for her individual, and the individual had a note, sliding scale if paid within 48 hours. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that the card on file had been changed to hers, and the email notification of the invoice went to her personal address, not our shared one. I don't monitor her email. I only saw it because our budgeting app pulled in the transaction and flagged it as new vendor. It was small. It should have been nothing. It felt like a door closing in a house where we had committed to open plan. "Hey," I said that night while we brushed our teeth. "Did Pike change his billing? I saw a sliding scales note." She spat, rinsed, patted her mouth like it had just told the truth. "He does that for individual work sometimes," she said, "because the hospital is tight and I can't always plan." She kissed my cheek and walked away before I could feel the itch behind my ribs asking for something stupid like a ledger. He started using phrases in the room that were good therapy and also, I don't know. They tilted. "Mara, with your history, being chosen isn't a luxury," he'd say round and right, but with a weight on history I hadn't been let into. "Mark, your productivity might be a survival strategy," he'd say to me, and I wanted to ask survive what, because the only thing I'd survived in the last decade was 3 CTOs and a neighbor who vacuumed at 2 a.m. I noticed he referenced details that weren't from our couple sessions. A meal at a place I hadn't been. A dream image. Mara on a ferry missing a dock while I watched from shore. That made his eyes go soft. It's appropriate for a therapist to hold individual material. It's also appropriate for a guy sitting on the couple couch to notice he has fallen out of the circle in invisible ways. The punch to the gut was small and stupid. A borrowed hoodie. Pike kept the office cool. I run warm. I like that. One Wednesday, Mara arrived for our session already wearing a faded gray hoodie with a stitched silver thread along the hem. I'd never seen it. After session, she said she'd left her jacket at the hospital and had grabbed something. It smelled like cedar, not our place. She wore it home. On our couch, her hands disappeared into the sleeves, and she smiled to herself while I talked about sprid points like I was narrating a nature documentary from inside a tank. 2 nights later, I was cleaning up old photos off my phone to make room for a work trip video when I found a live photo Mara had airdropped me months ago from a day hike. We'd take one picture of us on every trail, a truce with our phones. I pressed the live part without thinking, and the frozen image became motion for 1 second, and in that second, the man taking the photo said, "Tip your chin," and it wasn't me. It wasn't any of our friends. It was a voice I knew because I'd heard it say, "Can we slow that down?" while I cried in a soft chair. I didn't go straight to conspiracy. I heard the voice and thought, okay, she runs into him sometimes. This is a small hill. Therapists live near their offices. Seattle is a village with better coffee. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I also told myself to ask for a copy of our records, because if there's one thing I know about systems, it's that they tell on people when you ask the boring questions. "Hey," I said at the start of the next session, "could we get copies of our treatment plan and any notes you're comfortable sharing? For me, not for a fight. I like seeing the map." Therapists vary on notes. Some keep detailed process notes, some write only what insurance wants to see. Pike smiled like a teacher whose student has asked for the syllabus. "Absolutely," he said. "Couples counseling notes are a bit different. There's material that belongs to each of you individually. But I can give you the shared parts." "That's great," I said. He didn't send them that week. We kept running the plays. Session, tiny gains, backslide. While we talked about repair, my brain built a parallel board with columns, phone call times, charges, calendar entries. Not because I intended to audit my girlfriend. Because data had always been my way of proving I wasn't crazy. Mara and I share a Verizon family plan because I'm the idiot who thinks bundling is love. The account shows call logs and durations, not content. In a month that had otherwise been quiet, there were 47 calls to a 206 number I didn't recognize, averaging 3 minutes, often at 10,034 p.m., 7,006 a.m., 12,012 p.m., the times when a person stands in a stairwell and needs a voice to say, "You're right." I reverse searched the number. It was a landline spoof, protected, fronted by an answering service. There are 100 reasons a therapist would use a service. There are fewer reasons a therapist would be on the phone with your girlfriend 47 times in a month for 3-minute bursts that align with smoke breaks. Boundaries, I told myself, like a prayer. Benefit of doubt. Then I told myself something else. Ask the right question. In the next session, I didn't accuse. I asked, "What are the boundaries around between session contact?" I said, "for both of us." Pike nodded slowly, like he appreciated the wording. "Great question," he said. "Generally, I don't process content between sessions. If someone's triggered or dysregulated, I might do a quick check-in, help them resettle. If the crisis is real, I refer to higher care." "Do you do that for both of us?" I asked. "Of course," he said. Mara looked at me like I'd written a pop quiz. "What is this?" she asked. "It's me trying to understand the rules," I said. He leaned forward. "Is there a part of you that imagines I might prefer Mara to you?" he asked, not unkindly. "Yes," I said, "because the room demands honesty, and if the room is a trap, you should at least know where the teeth are." He nodded like I'd done a brave thing. "Let's talk about that part." We talked about my dad leaving when I was 11 in a way that technically wasn't leaving, just moving out to give your mother space. About how I learned to narrate myself into usefulness, about how being chosen is not the same as being needed. He did good work there. I won't pretend he didn't. It helped. And also, even good work can hide a bad line item. I asked for the notes again in an email. He replied with an apology for delay and a PDF. It was fine. A treatment plan with checkboxes, improve conflict repair cycles, increase positive bids, reduce pursuer-distancer escalation. A few lines of progress observed. The metadata on the PDF said it had been created 6 minutes before he sent it. Of course it had. Therapists don't live for our paperwork. But when I opened the document properties, my name was spelled wrong. Mark, not Mark. The way it had been spelled only in the very first phone form I'd filled out on his website, which meant he'd pulled the template from intake and never corrected it in his system. Which meant the system he wasn't updating might also be the system that reported to insurers. Which meant what exactly? That he was sloppy with the file for my life while being meticulous with Mara's glances? The moment I stopped being generous was a Wednesday morning when I stopped into Volunteer Park Cafe for a croissant and saw Dr. Pike sitting in the back corner with his leg tucked under him like a grad student. Across from him, in a gray hoodie with silver thread at the hem, was my girlfriend. They weren't across a desk. They were knee to knee. And they weren't tense like clients breaking rules. They were comfortable, like people whose bodies had already decided the rules were a suggestion. I froze, not because I wanted to eavesdrop, but because the version of reality in which you wave and introduce yourself as boyfriend, meet therapist, is one in which your face has to be made of leather. Mara spotted me first. She did a small, surprised smile, like a woman bumped into an old friend, not a person caught on a day she didn't intend to ruin. "Hey," she said, "I was just doing a quick check-in with Dr. Pike before my shift." "On a Wednesday," I said, too lightly, "at a cafe." He stood, managed to look both apologetic and firm. "Mara was triggered by something that came up last session," he said, using the word triggered like a magic pass. "This is just to keep her regulated." "Wouldn't your office do that?" I asked. Or the phone you told us not to use for content? He didn't flinch. He did a therapist nod, the one that says you're being stoic, and he admires it. We can talk about boundaries next time, he said. This was an exception. How many exceptions do I not know about? I asked. Mara put her palm up. Mark, she said, soft, like a nurse telling a family member. The monitor beeps don't mean what you think they mean. Please. Okay, I said, and walked out with a pastry I didn't taste. At home, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and did the thing I do when the room is water. I wrote down nouns until the floor came back. Wednesday Cafe. Hoodie. 47 calls. PDF created 6 minutes before sending. Fees rerouted. Sliding scale. Live photo with voice. Check-ins. Triggered. Exception. There is a legal version of the next part and a human version. Legally, I didn't hack anything. I logged into the only places I have a right to: our phone plan, our joint credit card, our shared Google Calendar that we used for meal plans and cat appointments, and, apparently, therapy exceptions. I printed what a judge would allow if a judge were asked, which I wasn't planning to ask. I compared the log of calls to the times I knew Mara was at work. They lined up to breaks: 10,000,034, 2006, 4,000,058. I matched the cafe rendezvous to a calendar entry. Quick grounding, M. A euphemism wearing scrubs. I traced 3 Venmos from Mara to AP Coaching for $120 each, paid with private notes, breathwork, somatic reset, homework. AP Coaching. Aaron Pike. The acronym wasn't clever. It was lazy. He'd avoided the practice name to keep it off insurance. He'd named the work something other than therapy to circumvent boundaries he himself had set. He was double-dipping paid for the formal session, then paid under the table for the magic extracurriculars. I didn't need to name the third currency moving in the room. I didn't confront. Not yet. I made one phone call to the Washington State Department of Health complaint intake. I didn't say his name. I asked a hypothetical, because hypotheticals let you hear the shape of a rule without sounding like you're trying to get someone arrested. What are the constraints around a couple's therapist engaging in separate paid services with one member of the couple outside the modality of therapy? I asked. The woman on the line had a voice like a middle school secretary who has seen everything. It depends, she said. Dual relationships are an ethical issue. Romantic or sexual relationships with current clients are prohibited. Inappropriate boundary crossings can be a basis for investigation. She paused. You sound like a nice man asking safe questions. I'm trying to be, I said. Document, she said. Don't threaten. If you file facts. I filed a different kind of fact first. I booked a solo session with Pike. Couples work plus individual work, he'd said, is allowed if it serves the couple. I wanted to see if the same warmth he wrapped around Mara extended to me when she wasn't in the room. He looked tired when I arrived, the way people look when they've been performing empathy for 6 hours and have a few left. He offered water. He sat with his leg tucked under him, the way he does with people he wants to feel equal with. For 40 minutes, he did good therapy. He traced my habit of explaining to fix back to a boy who learned to become useful to be loved. He praised me for not black and white thinking when it came to Mara. He said all the right words in the right order. Then, at minute 41, I asked the wrong question on purpose. Are you in love with my girlfriend? I asked. He didn't flinch. He didn't blush. He didn't laugh. He did a therapist move, stayed still, and then said, I care about both of you in different ways. That isn't the question you want to ask. It's exactly the question, I said, and if my voice shook, I let it. Mara is doing trauma work that predates you, he said. It's easy to make me the story because I'm the one in the room asking her to feel what she spent a life not feeling. That can look like transference. Does your Venmo say transference? I asked. Does your hoodie? There it was. A flash. Not shame. Not even anger. Annoyance, like a man who has been inconvenienced by an amateur. "You're looking for a scapegoat for a dynamic that takes two," he said, measured, and in that moment, I saw not my therapist, but a man who believed the word dynamic absolved him of physics. "I'll see you next week," I said. I stood. He didn't stop me. His face did something small and calculating, taking stock of how much control he had left in the room, and then smoothed. On the sidewalk, the rain had come back. Very Seattle. Very cinematic if I'd been a different man. I walked to the gas station because I needed fluorescent lights and beef jerky smells, and a teenager buying energy drinks to remind me people were still stupid in ways that didn't require ethics committees. That night, Mara came home exhausted and sweet. She sat on the counter while I chopped onions and told me a story about a resident who cried into her N95 after a family Zoom. She leaned into my back when I stirred the pot and said, "Thank you for making this," like gratitude could sand the edges off the week. After dinner, she put her feet in my lap and stroked the space between my thumb and forefinger with her finger the way she does when she wants me to think of sleep instead of algebra. I almost chose to forget. That's the part I don't love admitting. I almost chose a future where I knew and didn't know, and we drifted toward a version of, okay, the way a ship drifts toward a continent no one bothered to name. Then her phone lit up with the custom tone. She glanced at it, smiled in a way a person smiles when the person on the other end knows the inside of their skin, and typed a response with the kind of speed only certain conversations get. She looked at me, caught my eyes, and set the phone face down. I didn't say a word. I stood, took our plates to the sink, and rinsed rice down the drain while my heart did that slow, heavy thump you feel before you pass out or stand up straighter. The next morning, I wrote 2 emails, one to Dr. Pike requesting in writing a copy of all communications between him and either member of the couple between sessions for continuity of care, even though I knew he'd say no. He replied with a boundary statement. Between session communications are not part of the clinical record. I encourage both of you to bring any content back into the room. The second email went to a domain that felt like a dare, wa bordy dates, Venmo handles, the AP coaching notes, the sliding scale invoices with personal email. I didn't say he slept with my girlfriend. I didn't know that yet. I said he was creating a dual relationship with one member of a couple that compromised treatment integrity and might violate WAC 246-S6046, which I had Googled until my eyes hurt. I didn't hit send. Instead, I texted Mara. "Can we use our 5-minute check-in tonight for a topic that might feel unsafe?" I wrote. She replied yes with a heart. I went to work and stared at a backlog like it was going to confess. I fixed a bug. I ate noodles at my desk. I looked at my email draft like it was a grenade in my pocket. On the walk home, Seattle did its thing where it smells like when you first open a bag of potting soil. I bought flowers from the man outside the grocery because men who have ruined their evenings also buy flowers as a superstition. I put them in a vase and I waited. She came in, kissed my neck, kicked off her shoes, and complimented the flowers like a person stepping into a photograph of a life. We did the 5-minute timer thing because Dr. Pike says timers make hard things possible, and timers do when everyone intends to be good. "I'm scared," I said when it was my turn. "I'm scared. I'm losing you, and the part of me that knows how to keep you is doing math, and that won't work here." She put her hand on the table, palm up. I put mine in it. "I'm scared too," she said. "I'm scared that if I ask for what I need, I'll be too much, and if I don't ask, I'll disappear, and either way, you'll resent me." I nodded. "I think we need to find a new therapist," I said. "Together." Her face did a thing I will never forget. It softened in a way that said relief, and then hardened so fast it looked like pain. "Why?" she asked, 2 even. "Because I saw you two at the cafe," I said. Because there are 47 calls to his main line from your phone in a month. Because you Venmo him as coaching when we pay him as therapy. Because he's meeting you in hoodies, and I don't know where the work ends and the thing I think I'm seeing begins. Her mouth opened. She closed it. She took her hand back and laced her fingers together like prayer had requirements. Those were grounding sessions, she said. Careful. He said it would help me not spiral. You said you supported my individual work. I do, I said. Not like this. She shook her head once, quick. You are being controlling, she said, and the word landed like a verdict. You're trying to police my help. I'm trying to make sure the help is help, I said. I'm trying to make sure I'm not subsidizing my own exit. She stood, paced, turned into a person who uses their body to stop a thing from entering the room. He is professional, she said. He is ethical. He told me transference happens and that I might feel safe with him because I never felt safe with my dad and that it's normal. Transference doesn't rent a cabin, I said, and immediately wished I'd said it differently. She blinked. What? Nothing, I said, and that was the first truly cowardly thing I did. I had not proof of a cabin. I had proof of coffee and phone calls and a hoodie that didn't belong to me. She grabbed her phone. For a second, I thought she would text him a script and he would reply with the line. Instead, she put it down and faced me. If you push this, she said, I'll leave. If I don't, I said, I will. We stared at each other across a table that had held every dinner we'd called a truce over. The flowers stared too, rude, new, stupid. Okay, she said finally, new therapist. But I'll keep seeing Aaron as my individual because switching individuals is traumatic. No, I said, we stop with him, both of us, or I leave. That is abuse, she said, with the boldness of a nurse who has learned the right words to name the wrong thing. You can't take my support away to get your way. I'm not taking anything, I said. I'm stepping out of a room that hurts me to be in. You can stay if you choose. You want me to fail, she said, and I realized she had already rehearsed this conversation with a man in a hoodie who had taught her how to survive me by calling me names that fit when you twist them. I didn't yell. I didn't call her names back. I said, we're done for tonight, and went for a walk up to St. Mark's where the city lets itself hum. I sat on a cold stone wall and watched a train of headlights stare across the lake. I put my phone on airplane mode and imagined never turning it back on. When I got home near midnight, Mara was asleep on the couch, TV still murmuring a cooking show where everybody cries when scallops overcook. Her phone was on the coffee table, black screen, face down. I plugged it in because I am ridiculous and covered her with a blanket and hated that my body still loved her in the exact same amount as it had in the morning. In the morning, there was a sticky note on the kettle. Therapy tonight, 6 p.m., it said in her tidy nurse handwriting. Please don't ambush me. A fair request. Under that, she had drawn a tiny heart, which made me laugh out loud because human beings are absurd in the face of their own fires. I went to work and built a deck and avoided every person named Aaron in my contact list. At 5005, I climbed the stairs to Pike's office like a man walking into a job interview he didn't want. He was in uniform, calm, room staged as always. Mara sat on the couch, back straight, knee bouncing once, twice, then catching itself. We sat. The clock ticked like a stopwatch under a blanket. He opened his mouth to start the ritual. I interrupted, rude, using a tone he'd taught us not to use. Before we do anything, I said, I need to put something on the table. He inclined his head. I kept my voice even. I will not continue therapy in a room where my therapist has paid. Private contact with my partner outside of therapy. I want to see your billing ledger. I want to see your policies in writing. And then I want us to end this relationship and transfer to someone who isn't you. He looked at Mara, not me. She looked at him, not me. The eye contact lasted one breath too long. Then he did the thing he does, the compassionate half nod, and said, "We can slow that down." "No," I said, "we can't." He pivoted to the script. "What are you feeling in your body, Mark?" he asked. "Anger," I said, "and dignity." He considered that, and for the first time since we sat on his couch in January, I saw something like impatience. "I have not violated boundaries," he said. "I have used clinical judgment to ensure Mara's safety." "By billing her AP coaching for 3 hallway calls a day," I said. Mara flinched. "You looked at my bank," she said, and the betrayal in her voice made me want to throw myself off the couch and apologize for counting, like a person who thinks math can save him. "We can't fix this with a debate," he said, almost sharp. "We need to locate the pattern. Mark, your need for control." "Stop," I said, and my voice did a thing that felt like opening a window in a house that had been smelling like paint for weeks. "We are done here." I stood. He didn't. Mara did too, but slowly, as if time were thick in that room. "Please," she said. "It's a word that has 100 meanings. This one meant, don't make me choose today." "You already chose," I said, and I didn't mean it as a dagger. It still landed like one. I walked out into a rain that had committed to its bit. The bergamot followed me like a small ghost. I put my hood up, put my hands in my pockets, and felt the email draft to the Department of Health like a stone there. When the crosswalk sign changed, I took my phone out, opened the draft, and put my thumb over send. I didn't press it. Not yet. I had one more boring thing to do first, because the boring things are the skeleton of the truth. The portal we use for appointments had a calendar sync, so you could add sessions right to your Google Calendar. Admins sometimes leave breadcrumbs. I clicked into the account settings, looked at the integrations tab, and saw a linked calendar named AP Personal. That wouldn't give me access, obviously. It did give me a calendar ID, a string, only an admin would ever need. It also showed me a color legend. Couple sessions were blue. Individual sessions were green. Coaching. Blocks were yellow. It wasn't a list of dates. It was a logic pattern, enough to suggest a map. I wrote down the colors. I took a picture of the screen. I closed the tab. Then I sent the email. I didn't sleep after I hit send. I lay there with the ceiling like a blank form and listened to my building flex in the rain. It felt less like detonating something and more like walking away from a fuse. I couldn't unlight even if I wanted to. In the morning, there was an auto-reply from the Washington State Department of Health. Complaint received. An investigator would be assigned. Do not reply to this email. Bureaucracy has a smell. Toner and coffee and inevitability. I didn't tell Mara I'd filed. I cooked eggs and we performed a quiet that was more polite than peace. She kissed my shoulder when she left for a day shift, and it landed like a thank you note to a stranger. I opened my laptop and did the other thing I know how to do: stack boring facts until they make a shape no one can pretend not to see. Phone logs, Venmo screenshots, portal invoices, our shared calendar entries with the little yellow blocks she'd called grounding. A photo of the cafe, time-stamped by my phone, with the angle you get when you pretend to check a text so you don't have to decide if you're the kind of person who takes evidence of a life you didn't plan to be living. The PDF metadata on the treatment plan, created 6 minutes before sending. Author field still spelled Mark. A printout from the Secretary of State's site for AP Coaching, PLLC. There it was, a separate entity, filed last year, same mailing address as the therapy office, different bank. I expected silence from the state. I got a call 2 days later. The investigator introduced herself as Lorraine Bandera, voice like a woman who has taught high school and survived on purpose. She said she couldn't discuss outcomes, that they were only in the intake phase, that she needed to understand chronology and scope. I told the story like I tell roadmaps at work, not dramatic, just a straight line through dates and nouns. She asked exactly 3 questions that mattered. Did I ever sign a consent for coaching? No. Had Pike ever disclosed dual role risks in writing? No. Did any between session contact include content or directives? Yes. Breathwork instructions, somatic reset, homework. I heard her pen pause in the air. We'll be requesting records, she said. Stop asking him for anything. If you talk to your partner about this, don't ask her to bring you anything either. Washington is strict about consent. Just keep your side clean. There's more than one side, I said, and she exhaled in a way that told me she has said that sentence in too many kitchens. The next thing Pike did was textbook. He sent us both a clarifying policy email. It read like a pamphlet and was full of words you can only write if you believe the paper is stronger than the facts. Between session contact is limited to scheduling, crisis triage, and brief grounding check-ins. Any adjunct coaching services are not therapy. All services are bound by the same ethics. He managed to make 3 sentences contradict each other so politely you almost wanted to congratulate him. He attached a PDF titled Office Policies V4, created that morning. The footer said, Updated January, which made me laugh out loud in an empty apartment. I saved it. I didn't reply. Mara forwarded the email to me with a single line above it. This is what I meant. It wasn't combative. It read like a person asking the universe to confirm it hadn't moved the street she lives on. Okay, I wrote back. I'm going to step out of the therapy. I won't stop you from seeing him. But I won't sit in a room where the rules change depending on which chair you're in. She didn't write back for 4 hours. When she did, the message was tight and deliberate. I'm not doing anything wrong. He is the only person who doesn't make me feel like a problem to be solved. I typed 3 answers and erased all of them. I went for a run in the rain and let my lungs argue with my legs until they were too tired to make law. Lorraine called again a week later. We've asked for a production of records, she said. He provided notes that appeared to be compiled recently. We'll be talking to your partner as a witness, if she consents. That's up to her. Will you tell her I filed? I asked. We'll tell her a complaint exists, she said. She can guess what she wants. That night, Mara came home with the look people wear when a letter opened itself in their brain on the bus. Someone from the Department of Health called the unit and left a message for me, she said. Did you? Yes, I said, before she could turn it into a scavenger hunt. I filed. I didn't accuse you of anything. I told the board I think our therapist is running 2 lanes at once. She put her hands on the back of a chair and leaned into it, like she could push the room into a shape where the phone never rang. You went to the state. I didn't know who else to go to, I said. He's the one who taught me to bring it to the room. That's the room. He's going to lose his license, she said, half horror, half warning, as if saying it made me responsible for the gravity. Maybe he'll get a letter, I said. Maybe he'll get a course. Maybe nothing happens, but someone whose job it is to count the lines will count them. She stared at me like I was speaking a language she could read but didn't like. I won't talk to them, she said. I won't be your witness. You're not my witness, I said. You're a person in a story where the expert forgot the one rule he's not allowed to forget. Which is what? She asked, daring me to say the ugly version. Don't make yourself the point, I said, and for a second I saw her hear it. 2 days later, she slept at her sister's. She said it would be for a night or 2 to get a breath from my investigator energy, and I said, okay. Like a person who knows you don't chain a person to a chair and call it repair. I fed the cat and ate sad pasta and let the apartment sound like itself for the first time in weeks. Dev came by with dumplings and beer and a patience that didn't require me to perform clarity. You want justice or distance? He asked after we ate in friendly silence. Both, I said. I want to not be crazy, and I want to not live inside this anymore. Those are cousins, he said. You don't always get them in the same room. He listened to the whole thing, start to Lorraine. He whistled once, soft, at AP Personal. He asked one question that cut the mess into manageable blocks. If the board did nothing, what would you do? Leave, I said, before I could think of a worse answer. Then it's already simple, he said. The board is just a fire alarm for the next people. Mara texted late that night, staying at Kate's again. I didn't ask for an ETA. It felt clean to fail to ask. The board moved faster than I thought. Bureaucracies could. 2 weeks after the first call, Lorraine asked if I'd sit for a recorded interview. I took a half day and sat in a room that housed a Keurig and a stack of binders labeled with words like Practice Act. She placed a recorder on the table and read a little script to it. I told the story clean. She asked about the hoodie. I said it was small and stupid and still a part of the weather pattern. She asked if I had any reason to lie. I laughed once. If I wanted to win the room, I would have found a way to out-earn her therapist at kindness, I said. I'm here because I ran out of points. Good, she said. Honesty is boring. Boards love boring. A week later, the letter came. Not to me. To Mara. She called me breathless, both furious and something else. Hurt is the closest word. It's not just you, she said. Another woman filed. 2 years ago. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the laundry basket like it could help. What does it say? It says they've consolidated similar complaints. It says the board requested he cease seeing all current couples where either member had received individual services. It says they're reviewing his records and that he is to preserve all communications. She exhaled hard. He emailed me a termination letter, she said. Therapeutic termination. He said he can no longer provide care due to external processes that compromise the frame. He told me to find appropriate support. He offered 3 referrals. He fired you, I said, and hated that I felt relief. No confession, no confrontation scene you can storyboard, just a door closing itself. He didn't fire me, she said, stubborn. He's protecting me. From what? I asked gently. From a complaint you didn't want to be true, or from the consequences he invented. She didn't answer that. He asked me to delete our texts, she said, voice small, like the words were too heavy to carry all the way to the end of the sentence. Don't, I said. Don't delete anything, even if you never talk to Lorraine. Keep your side clean. I didn't tell you that so you could use it, she snapped. And then softer. I told you because I didn't know where else to put it. I'm here, I said, and it felt stupid and true at the same time. We didn't see each other for 5 days. The cat picked up a new habit of sitting in the doorway to the bedroom like a guard. I ran too much and slept just enough to make bad decisions seem like they were in other people's dictionaries. On the 6th day, Kate texted me, a thing she has never done in our entire mutual history, with a location pin for a coffee shop and the words, "Can you come now?" I went because the words now and coffee are a kind of spell when your life is on fire. Mara was there with her, hair messy, eyes raw. Kate is a person who does not waste syllables. She put a manila folder on the table like a magician laying down a deck. He's not the first, she said to me. And I think she just figured out she's not the only. Inside the folder, a printed Reddit thread. I almost laughed at the universe's cheap irony from Raw Seattle. A post about therapist boundary issues at a Capitol Hill practice. Comments anonymized and still obvious if you know the street and the smell of a waiting room. A link to the Department of Health's public actions page. Aaron R. Pike, LMFT. Statement of allegations, posted yesterday. Not yet an order, just a document with alleged in front of sentences that matched mine with different dates. A woman who wrote about coaching sessions that were more like dates with homework. Another who said she'd been told she was brave for desiring the container. Mara watched my face as I read. "Say it," she said, daring me to salt the wound. "I'm not the one who gets to say it," I said. She looked at Kate, then at the folder, then at me, then at her hands. "I wasn't special," she said finally, and the words came out like a person stepping into cold water because there's no other way across. "No," I said. "You were vulnerable. That's not the same thing." She cried in public, which she hates. Kate handed her a napkin with the speed of a sister who is trained for it. People pretended not to look. A barista pretended not to refill his sugar jar for a full minute. "He sent me a playlist," she said, out of nowhere, and then she laughed, an awful bird-hit glass sound. Imagine me saving that like a lifeline. "Don't imagine yourself cruel," I said. "Imagine yourself human." "I told you were controlling," she said, sniffing. "I used the word he taught me. I'm sorry." "I believed him too," I said. "I don't know what word that earns me." "Patient," Kate said, with a dryness that made me want to both hug her and leave the room to cry. The order, when it came 3 months later, was not a movie ending. It was a consent agreement with the state. He neither admitted nor denied, and yet he agreed to a 2-year suspension, stayed on conditions, mandatory ethics coursework, practice monitoring, a prohibition on individual therapy with current or former couples, clients for 5 years, a requirement to refund any non-therapy, coaching fees to clients who request it. A civil suit appeared on the docket a week after, someone else's lawyer using words bigger than mine. The office door on Pike Suite changed its hours to by appointment only. A different name slid into the directory downstairs the following spring. Mara and I did not become a miracle. We tried 3 sessions with a new therapist who had a laugh that didn't sound like a mirror. It was better in the ways a competent therapist makes things better. Less confusion, more air. But by then, something in us had already started packing. We did the kind respect of naming the box. We split the books, we hugged for a long time in our doorway at midnight like 2 people who hadn't failed so much as aged out of an old idea. She took the gold-scripted wine glasses. I kept the heavy skillet because we cried quietly without turning it into a performance. There was a world where we made it, she said, not asking for it back, just setting a photo on the mantle of an imaginary house. Maybe that world didn't have me in it, I said, and she shook her head and kissed my forehead and said, "Don't you dare do that to me, or you." The cat chose me, as cats do when cupboards look promising. Mara visits him. Sometimes we walk around the block and talk about work and the way the fairy horns carry over the hill when the wind is right. She's in individual therapy with a woman who sends invoices that say exactly what the thing is. No euphemisms, no coaching, no playlists. She doesn't like coffee shops anymore. I don't blame her. If you need karma in this story, it didn't show up with a cape. It showed up with refunds, with a name on a website under disciplinary actions, with a door that opens less often, with a man in nice boots sitting in ethics modules written by people who saw him coming years ago. It showed up as a call from a reporter that I didn't return because I'm not a story he gets to survive by being in the news. It showed up as a nurse who no longer accepts "he knows me better than you" as shorthand for help. It showed up as my phone not lighting up at midnight with a custom tone that made my stomach reach for a seatbelt. I moved to a smaller place with windows that refuse to be dramatic. I run in the mornings because I like the part where breath convinces your brain that a body is a good place to live. I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Sunita, who will not let me narrate my way out of feeling. First session, I asked for her policies in writing, and she smiled like she's had that question before and said, "Of course," and handed me a packet so clear it felt like taking a shower. I haven't asked her to like me. That feels like progress. Months later, I was in line at a bakery on 15th when a man behind me said, "Mark, I turned. Pike. No hoodie, just a jacket that costs the same as self-respect if you shop in the wrong store. He looked smaller in daylight, like a photograph after you take the filter off. Can we talk? He asked, performance smooth. I'd like to apologize. For what? I asked, because sometimes you only get one chance to make a person tell the truth. For misunderstandings, he said, and there it was, the weapon that sounds like a white flag. No, I said, try again. He watched me like a teacher deciding which tactic works on which student. I'm sorry that line's blurred, he said, and that you felt. You put your mouth in our house, I said, plain, not loud. You can send me a refund if you want to make something vanish, but we both know there's no zero on this. He started a sentence that had the word context in it. I stepped out of line and let the woman behind me order her cinnamon roll. We're done, I said, and walked out into a morning that had the courtesy to be ordinary. Here's the only sermon I'll allow myself. Therapy can save you. Therapists are not saints, boundaries are not an aesthetic, and if the person with the pen tries to become the point, leave the room, even if the couch is the softest thing you've ever sat on. The bravest thing I did wasn't filing a complaint. It was accepting that we need help. Does not mean we will be saved, and that staying honest when it hurts buys you a kind of sleep I hadn't paid for in years. Tell me what you would have done. Would you have swallowed the doubt to save the couple? Would you have waited for a smoking gun, or sent the boring receipts like I did and let the board do the math? Drop your take in the comments, especially if you've had a therapist blur the lines. If this one kept you listening, hit like so. It finds the next person Googling, "Is this ethical?" at 2 a.m. And subscribe for more messy, true-feeling stories where the twist isn't magic. It's paperwork and a person deciding to stop being a character in someone else's treatment plan.